Hello, my name is Dan Hennen. I'm joined along tonight with Greg Fernandez Jr. and a special guest. Today is April 5th, 2018, and we'll be discussing the Crowley case from Minnesota with a special guest. We've got someone on the line who is joining us tonight named Russell, and his background is very, I'm enthused about his background because we haven't heard someone with this background on this case. Russell's got a BS in counseling psychology, an MA in human sciences with a concentration in psychology, a postgraduate diploma in forensic science, and completed a 2-year internship with the Criminal Investigative Division at a sheriff's department. He is also an affiliate member of the Academy of Behavioral Profilers. Welcome, Russell.
Thank you.
And Greg, welcome to you here. I have not yet said hello to you. I jumped right in with Russell.
That's okay.
I guess
I'm a little excited.
But what we'll do here is we've got some time to chat. This is going to be published, and then we'll push this out on the Facebook pages and whatnot for people to listen to. But Russell, how did you get? What is your? I know I mentioned your background there, but if you can go on a little bit of what your background and what has brought you to this case here.
What brought me into this area? I started out in theology, so and that only lasted a semester, and so then I switched over to marriage and family counseling. That didn't last very long either, and was thinking about gerontology and stuff like that. And then faced with borderline personality lady while I was doing inpatient work, all these things led me not to go clinical psychology. And I just discovered I don't care, put it point blank, I don't care about your mommy and daddy issues, that it wasn't for me. All I wanted to do was, put it very bluntly, hang them high through a legal process. If you want therapeutic help, and you're denied it, I'll be the first person that will advocate for you to get it, because I do believe every person, whether they're guilty or not guilty, has the right to good, competent therapy and a good, competent therapist. I just learned early on that was not for me. I could not give that to someone. So, and then also through my life, seeing how women and children were treated, I just thought that, a lot of people need a voice, and you need to speak for that voice, especially for those who can't or will not speak for themselves. So that's what prompted me to get into this area. Okay. I don't know. I work better if you ask me questions.
Oh, very good, very good. What we'd like to start off with is, and we'd rather not call this an interview, but more or less just a talk or a discussion, because someone with your caliber of background would really be beneficial for this case. We've been going around and round with this case. I created the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook page. Greg Fernandez here is one of the admins, and we like to start off by letting people know that we're not here to, solve the case and put someone behind bars, but we're here to mainly just trying to look for the evidence of that David really did do this. So far, we haven't seen that. It appears to be a cover-up of some sort. We're not sure who. We're not sure who to point the fingers at. We're really not even interested in pointing the fingers at anyone, but nothing we see sheds any light on the fact that David Crowley did this to his wife Kamel, and his daughter Rani. So we're looking to get some kind of background of that from your background. Have you gone through the crime scene photos and read through the police reports at all, Russell?
Yes, I have. I was given access to quite an extensive amount of paperwork that dealt with this case, and it only took me reading 3 pages before I stopped, because I was thinking there's no sense in going any further, because already I know there's something wrong.
Interesting.
So it only took me 3 pages out of all the extensive material I had, and that was even before I got to the pictures.
Really? So what document was this? Was this the police report?
It was the autopsy reports and the police reports. I don't know how you guys. To preface this, I'm not a politically correct person. So if I say anything that is whatever, please feel free to, edit or whatever. But I don't do politically correctness, so I'm not going to tiptoe around this.
That's very good. We like that. We encourage that. That's good.
And so, from the very first 3 pages, to say that the police case or the police work was inept would be a huge understatement. There are so many things that were not done right. There were the timeline is totally and completely there's something wrong with the timeline. I believe that if you had good forensic investigators, if you had good forensic entomologists, a forensic anthropologist, a good forensic pathologist, not a coroner and not a regular medical examiner. And I think if you had people who really cared, if it had ever gone to court, it wouldn't. The way it is now, it would not go to court because it's so inconsistent. It's just unbelievable, especially with the timeline. I can't believe that they got away with as much as, and I'm not saying who they are, but that it's got away with as much as it has. And I've never ever heard of somebody calling for a medical examiner and the medical examiner shows up 5+ hours later. That's no. I'm sorry, that's just no. That's all I can say, that's no. So that was the first thing that caught my eye with that there was something really, really wrong. And when you're reading over the police reports and you're trying to imagine what each of these individual characters or participants or actors in this story are doing, it does not make sense. You have somebody from next door calling, and then you get the idea that it's the police who are taking the word of the person who's calling from next door. I've never heard of that, ever. There are things where people are saying that they looked through the window and they didn't see anything, but yet they see a dog. But yet when you look at the pictures, it's an indicator, a very clear indicator that there was never anything that ever looked out that window. So I'm looking at that, and it just from the get-go, it just didn't smell right. That's all. There was something's wrong.
Now, Russell, just if I can go back a second, I don't have a background in this, and neither does Greg, and maybe you would agree, Greg, but what would be the time for that medical examiner to show up? You stated 5 hours is
that's and then it's not only for the time that they showed up, but it's the amount of time that they actually stayed.
Okay.
That's wrong, because now I'm not saying medical examiners have to show up on every case. They will send their deputy medical examiner, or they can send their investigators out if the crime scene is not that questionable, or if the crime scene is not to such an extent as this one was evidencing. But with this type of crime scene, I think any forensic pathologist or any type of medical examiner that's worth half their weight would not take 5 hours. You go out, and the most crucial thing, time is your enemy. Okay? So from the time that this first word gets out, from the time the very first responding officer sees this type of crime scene, there's a couple things that's very, very crucial. One, you must always secure the crime scene to make sure that no one else is in jeopardy, no one else's life. The criminals, the perpetrators are not still at the scene. That's paramount. Nothing else matters. But once that's been established, then the crucial thing is a time factor. You're running against a time clock here. And the longer you allow something to sit out, the more chance that you have of the degradation of the evidence, the trace evidence, and everything else start to disappear or get corrupted, you know. So you're running on a timeline. It's very crucial you get there as fast as you can, and it's extremely crucial that everything is left in situ. And what I mean by situ is as it was when the first, as possible, when the very first responder showed up. Everything has to be in situ. Then then the medical examiner has to get there right away, because this is a multiple case where you have multiple decedents, and you don't know how they died at the point. And I would like to stress that emphatically. No one other than the medical examiner, even after the medical examiner has investigated, looked at the bodies, done everything they can tell you what happened. No one. And anyone who sits there and says they walk in, and they say, oh yeah, we got a dead child here that's 5 years old, or oh, we have this, oh, this is suicide. They need to shut up, because they're part of the problem, not part of the solution. Okay? They do not have the training, they do not have the education, they do not have the experience to make such a statement. And I really would like to emphasize this, only the medical examiner, no one else, can tell you when to move the bodies, can tell the police when they can start investigating, can say anything about what may or may not have happened at that scene. And that's only after all the evidence is in, the autopsies have been done, all the tests have come back, you know, trace evidence, toxicology, histology, entomology. I mean, all those tests that maybe need done, until they all come back, because that all is added into a forensic examiner's report, and only after that report is done can the medical examiner state this is what the evidence is pointing to. So if that was done, and when I'm reading this report, all that was done way before the medical examiner even showed up. And then for them to sit there, the medical examiner apparently was called sometime around 5, somewhere between 3 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember the exact time. But then he doesn't show up until 11-something at night. So, and then the thing, he leaves at 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I don't know about you. I've never heard of that. So if there's any questions right now before I continue, that would be great.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg. Do you have anything?
No, please keep on going.
Okay, so, and then the fact of the amount of time that was taken by the medical examiner once they did show up is a joke. It's a serious joke. With this type of crime scene, and the amount of decedents involved and all the different things that are in play, there's absolutely no way in my professional mind I can ever see any examiner coming there at the time they did and then around 4 o'clock in the morning leaving. That is unheard of. That's just unheard of. I can't say anything other than that, because I will not ever get into speculation. I will not get into conjecture. So it's in my mind, it's no. Okay.
Now, Russell, I've got a question, Michael. With 3 decedents in a case like this, how long would it take for the case or the scene to be cleared and the professional cleaners to come in?
I would dare to say at a minimum of a day. The bare minimum of a day or 24 hours. I really cannot see it that the whole scene is secured. I'm talking about the scene. The police are never in control until I wish people would stop watching TV. The police are not in control. The only time they are in control is when the first responder gets there. He secures the house, makes sure that the perpetrators are not there. No one else's life is in danger. EMTs are not needed. Paramedics, they're not needed. But once that's been established, the crime scene, the entire crime scene, is the sole authority of the medical examiner, not the police. The police have no jurisdiction. They have no say-so at all.
Can they take photos?
They can't do squat. And that's reality. The only people that can come in and take pictures is not the police. It would be the investigators from the medical examiner's office, your CSI type people. And only when the medical examiner tells them to. Okay, in doing a crime scene, this is the other thing I found that was totally done with ineptness, is that when you have a crime scene like this, unbeknownst to everyone else, the body, or bodies in this case, is the very last thing you look at. You don't approach them. Everything's done in a grid fashion. You do your investigation in a grid fashion, and in this case, you would do it in a circular grid fashion. Okay, you start from the furthest point from where the bodies are at, and you do your investigation, and you work your investigation in a circular grid that will lead to the bodies. So you start from the outside. The police, the investigators, they look for everything on the outside, and you limit. It is very crucial that, and this is something I noticed, it's very crucial that you limit the amount of access to the crime scene. And that means if you're a policeman and you don't need to be there, you're not supposed to be there. You can be sitting outside or standing outside, secure the perimeter or whatever, but you do not have no one go into that crime scene. No one. You limit the amount of people that go into that crime scene, and if you have to have someone go into the crime scene, you always have to have a person that stands outside that takes the names of everyone who goes in and goes out, and everyone who goes in, they follow a very certain pathway that's already been pre-established. You do not walk around willy-nilly. It's a predetermined pathway that each one egresses and regresses. You go in, you go out the same way, and you limit the amount of things. And this is why the time frame is ridiculous, because it takes hours. In most cases that were even more simpler than this, it could take hours before you ever get to the body. So you look outside, you go inside, and you're taking pictures, and all that kind of good stuff. You're doing that, and finally, then and during this time, the only person that is allowed to even approach the decedents before any of this is finished is the medical examiner, because they control the scene, not the police, not the CSI techs, none of those people. The medical examiner has absolute authority. They go in, and they're the only ones that can walk up to that scene. They're not followed by policemen. They're not followed unless the medical examiner requests his techs to come in and do whatever because the medical examiner has absolute authority. Whatever the medical examiner wants, then those people come in. But only when the medical examiner is done with the body will he release the crime scene to the police. That's when the police come in, and then they can start doing their fingerprinting and their picture taking, because all the pictures of the scenes should have already been taken by the crime scene techs upon the orders of the medical examiner. And I didn't see that. I saw this thing was, according to what I read, it was rushed. And that's a huge understatement. It was rushed. And so if there's any other questions, because it's not something like TV. It's not a matter you go in and all of a sudden the case is solved, and 30 minutes later the crime scene's closed and the medical examiner has the body in the autopsy room and he's doing the autopsy already. That's not reality. That's TV. It takes hours. And from the time the medical examiner was supposedly have gotten there, only 4 hours? I mean, give me a break. No.
Now, also from a law enforcement perspective, the first press releases we saw was the same night was a press release saying bodies were found in a home and it's being investigated. The next night, I think it was this, Greg, suspicious activities. Suspicious 3 bodies are found. On the second day, it was murder, double murder, suicide, most likely killed himself, and the public is not at threat, in danger of a killer on the loose. And then the very next day, it was a double murder followed by a suicide, and tests will be done and months will be taken, months before the forensics will be done, but really that's the case. It was all basically wrapped up in a nice bow 48 hours after the fact. Is that normal for that?
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Like that?
The response are the news in this person's or this professional person's way of thinking was unprofessional and should never have happened. You cannot, within that short period of time, say, oh, we have a suicide, because that's irresponsible, because there is no way in the world, none, that you can walk in to a crime scene such as this and say, oh, it's a homicide suicide. No, that's a matter of, that shows me that there's a possible or a plausible indication that is being rushed or covered up. You can't. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. Point blank. You cannot. If you were any person that had any credibility, or you were worthy or mustard or whatever, I'm sorry, you should not. The medical examiner should have spoke up right away and went to the police and said, excuse me, you cannot put that information out there.
Now, a lot of people watching this case also think that perhaps it was small town cops, not familiar with this. This Apple Valley is the city of population's over 50,000. It's a good-sized city. It's a good, it's fairly good size, with very good, from what I've heard, good detectives, good law enforcement, and very bright people on that staff. Now, later that year, when the investigation was concluded, the detective staff won the Law Enforcement of the Year award for the Apple Valley Police Department, and 2 people handling the case were the Officers of the Year for all their work they've done on this case. Would that be something that's plausible for the efforts like this to be rewarded?
No.
Or what's your thought?
It should have never happened. Why should someone get congratulated over a job that was completely inept? Procedure that was not followed. And the fact that you may be a good, this is not Redondo Beach, this is not La Jolla, this is not the Hamptons. It shouldn't happen this way anywhere. And to say that, oh, well, maybe they're small town, because I know about Apple Valley, I've lived in Minnesota, I've worked in Minneapolis before, so, I know about Minnesota. And I know where Apple Valley is, and I can see it as clear as day in my head, and there's no excuse for this. I'm sorry. To sit there and say, well, they didn't know, or maybe they didn't do this, or maybe they didn't do that. I'm going to be very blunt and say BS. And no. When it comes to forensics, for me, it's either you know what you're doing or you don't.
Yeah,
there is no in between.
And after looking at some of this, I've made this comment before, and I've often gotten chastised for it. I said there's really only two conclusions. The law enforcement was compromised here to do something that they didn't want, or they were just inept at the entire process. That's really all that I can see coming forth from the things that I've read and the pictures that I've seen in the police reports. And I don't believe that inept, but this was horrendously done. It only leads one to conclude that someone was compromised along the way here by higher ups somewhere.
I don't know about higher up, but I will have to say that you're not alone in that opinion. I mean, a blind man could look at this case and know that it was not done according to procedure. It was not. And the fact that, and I have to touch on a very, very serious point here that I think everyone is overlooking. Like I have stated before, everyone always wants to ask why. Why? And I learned this the hard way and studying and coming up and through what my experience and the things that I was involved in. The one question everybody wants to ask is why. That's the wrong question. The why is the given. The why, it's the how. The how is what's important. The how is going to tell you. The how will bring justification to the why. It's like people say, well, how can there be all these bad people in the world, blah, 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 blah. Well, why you ask me that when you already know the answer? The why is because sin. If you believe in that sort of thing, it's sin. So the why is already answered. Now, if you really want to get down to brass tacks, then you have to look at the how. What happened with these people's lives? What happened? What were all the different myriad of variables that had to come together to bring this act into fruition? You find that out, then you will discover the why was apparent all along. So the why is not the question to be asking. It's the how. And one of the things in this case that points to me, and this is why it's so important to study the behavioral aspects of a case, not only the crime scene itself, but to delve deep into the victim's background, to study in every little nth degree of the person, leave no privacy at all. I mean, study everything, strip them bare to the bones about who they were, what they believed, where they went, why they went. I mean, what they ate, why did they eat it, when and where. I mean, this is what you have to do. You do a behavioral analysis, behavioral assessment of the victims. And if you can figure out the how, the why becomes very self-apparent. And with this case, if you're studying this case, and automatically, if you don't know any better, and you go along with the murder-suicide, which I think is the biggest joke in the world, the one thing that points to it not being that is you have to study from what I've seen, and according, not my opinion, but from the evidence, and if you study the people's background, it was staged. That's the only thing, the evidence, not my opinion, I want to stress that, but the evidence points to it being staged. And what I mean by that is I'm a person that I like to study about people's religious beliefs. I don't believe in half of it, but I really believe that if you can, since I love behavior, that's what I'm trained in. You must never throw away or discount anything. Just because someone believes something you don't doesn't mean you're right, they're wrong, blah, 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 blah. You have to take it all in. You have to be you have to be dispassionate about everything. And so studying this, I have been to the Middle East, and I spent some time in the Middle East, extensive time in the Middle East, and I know about Islam, I know about the Quran, I collect Bibles, and I collect holy books, what people consider holy books. And if you know anything about Islam, anything at all, you will know that this crime scene was staged. First of all, and I'm not talking about militant Islam. No, I'm talking about any moderate Muslim. Any moderate Muslim. If they ever found out, if this ever became public, the person or persons who did whatever they did would be on a death list. And that's reality. That's not trying to scare someone. That's because you heard of the incident in Europe where someone made a caricature of Muhammad. And look at the outrage that happened after that, as a result of that. Now come and take that and place that same, the how, not the why, but the how. You place that into the arena of this case, and there is only one question, there's only one outcome you can come to. It was staged. First of all, no one's going to take an infidel's blood and write Allah Akbar on the wall. No one. It's a criminal offense. I mean, I want to cry because the act of this is so heinous. And I want to emphasize, I do not believe in Islam. It's not my thing, but I have to respect their belief, and I cannot discount it in anything. So first of all, no one will do that. The other thing is, no one, I really got to emphasize this, would never rip pages out of a Quran and throw them around the bodies of infidels. That, I'm sorry, that's a criminal, that's a death offense. That is a death offense. So that's not going to happen. And the worst, the most heinous thing that whoever this person or persons did was to take an infidel's dead hand or arm and lay it on top of a Quran. That is worse than the caricature that someone drew of Muhammad. And look at the response that created. You have somebody take the dead hand of an infidel and lay it on top. First, you put the Quran on the ground, which is, oh my, you have, the average public have no idea how heinous this really is. And then you put the Quran on the ground, and then you lay his hand on top of it. No, I want to sit here and cry right now. And I don't believe in Islam. I have a Quran. I have a very nice Quran, inlaid in gold. I treat it just as well as any other religious book. But that is because out of respect You never do that. And the moment you saw that, you don't need to look any further. If you know the how, you do not need to go any further in this investigation to know it was staged. And if you, like I say, if you know anything about Islamic faith, if you know anything about the Quran, the average person has no clue how important that book is. And no proper, in their mind, Islamic person would ever do that. And to defile that book with an infidel's dead hand is unconscionable. And that's all I got to say about that. It's just, it's heinous.
Yeah, I agree, Russell. That was held privately for, I think, 2 months before, I think it was March of 2015, before law enforcement even exposed that information to the families. And so that, and then it became public in January of 2016. And that was when that issue, when I call all that stuff the Muslim-related stuff that happened in the house of staging, for me personally, once I saw that, when that came to light, all my thoughts of it being staged went through the roof, because I knew for sure it was a poorly staged scene. It was a slam dunk once I saw that. I think the killers had a much better chance letting all that go, and it would have been more believable. But once they introduced all of these things, it was then to the point of overstaging the scene. And this was just a horrible, this was done by imbeciles. I mean, this was
those imbeciles, whether they know it or not, if the Muslim community ever found out who they were, I don't think their lives would be worth anything. Because that right there should tell you something very, very, very bad is wrong with this case.
Yep,
and with Muslims, when they make a statement, they don't take an infidel's blood and write it on the wall. This is Hollywood. You will look at this crime scene and it reeks of Hollywood. It's not done, ever. Not even once in any realm.
Now, on the documentary that came out, done by Eric Nelson, one of the final questions by the father of David Crowley, Dan Sr., says, you know, all we're left with is the why. I went through and read everything on the the hard drives and the journals, and I just can't come up with the why. And even Eric Nelson, while filming the documentary, says hopefully this will give people the answer to, potentially the why, because that's the one thing we're left with. Is that part of the distraction here, to get people looking at the why, do you think?
I want to re-stress, as long as you keep your attention on the why, you'll never move forward in this case.
Okay.
As long as we keep our attention on the why, you're not going to go nowhere. The why is already given. If you want to find a possible resolution to this, if there is one, if you just want to bring some solace to the victims of the families that are still living, then you have to look at the how, because the answer to this is in the how. The answer to this, you look at the crime scene photos, you look at the reports, the how is there. There is your answer. It is telling you everything you want to know. But the reason that is possibly that we're not getting nowhere is because everyone wants to go with the traditional notion of the why. And that is to fulfill some psychological need. You have people who are suffering great loss, and that's all they can see. And then other people want to do everything in their power to try to alleviate that. Well, I think we do a huge injustice to those people who are left behind by doing that. We look at the how. The people's signature. A signature is something that a criminal leaves behind that's very indicative of them and only them. Now, their signature could be something they left behind. It could be a forged note. It could be carvings on the body, the writing on the wall, whatever. Everything you need to know about who did this, not the why, but who, the how, is there. Everything. It's staring at us in the face. And the average person will never, ever, ever be able to outdo. They can't outdo this. They will sign their name to it. They will. There is no ands, ifs, or buts. They will.
Now, Russell, I know the current terminology, I think, is called a forensic behaviorist, but in the past, was that known as a person who put together like an FBI profile, a profile of the killers? Is that the same?
At the very beginning, we're talking in the early 1970s, it was known as profiling. But since then, that has been relegated to the land of TV. Okay, it is now called behavioral analysis.
Okay.
And behavioral analysis is more accurate, it's a better descriptor, because behavioral analysis shows not only are you profiling the individual, but you're also studying the behavioral aspect of an environment within a crime scene. So that, and when they figured this one out, they also figured out that if by studying a crime scene, if by studying the families, by their movements, by what their likes were, by what they did, where they went, why they went, what was the religious beliefs, why they held those beliefs, who contacted them, who wrote them, who did they write, all these things. By doing this type of analysis, they found that they could come more and more closer to the perpetrator, because the perpetrator is there. He's there. I mean, his signature is there. I mean, everything that you want to know about the perpetrator is there.
So what do you see there?
And so that's why it's called what? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you. What?
Oh, just saying. So if it's all there, what do you see? Do you see anything there that might help us kind of figure out who the perpetrator was?
Okay. What my suggestion would be is stop looking for the why. Okay. Stop looking for the why. Look at every aspect of this case. Pay attention to the people themselves, the victims. If you study the victims, you study their you study their habits, you study what their mail was, you study what they thought, what they believed, how well their relationships were with their family, their finances. I mean, everything. You study that, and you can get to intimately know the victims. You will see, there's a good chance that you will see the perpetrator. Because the perpetrator, no matter how good they are, they cannot hide that.
Now, Russell,
one thing is clear to me is this case, it seems to be made to look like something it's not. And that throws people off.
Correct. That's done in the form of a redirection to get people chasing their own tails, looking at other things. Now, in a case like this where there's an open investigation, for instance, on a case where they are actually law enforcement's looking for the killer. They're looking to try to find the bad guy. They'll bring in a person with, like, for instance, your background, and you'll put together an analysis of what type of person would be the perpetrator. Now, a case like this is closed. There's no need for someone like you. Would, for instance, the families contact a person with your background to say, we'd like to hire you to put together a profile of what we think, of what you think, who really did this, because we don't believe the official narrative? Do you ever get, is that common in your industry?
Yes. If I have to stress this, okay? And I don't mean to step on no one's toes, but yes, I am going to step on someone's toes, okay? If the law enforcement is truly interested in coming to understand, I'm not mentioning the truth because we're not here to find the truth. If the first of all, if the law enforcement agency and the medical examiner's office truly want to understand how to interpret the evidence in a very correct light, then yes, that would be a good thing to do. The one thing I don't believe is I don't believe in pseudoscience. I don't believe in calling in your crystal ball people. Okay, that's a joke. Pseudoscience has no place in a forensic environment. And so, but if you do have someone, and if you do, and it is not something that is uncommon, and if you do, you have to make sure that the person you have, one, has a training in the area by which you want investigated. It would be like if I was investigating some skeletons, and let's say I found a skeletonized remains, and I want them investigated, I would not bring in an anthropologist. No, I don't care if they had a doctorate degree. I would not. Now, I would bring a forensic anthropologist in. So you have to pick the right people who are going to investigate what you want, and they have to be trained in that area you want them to investigate. Because you've got a lot of good people out there. I believe there's enough evidence present already to warrant doubt. That I believe.
What would it take to get a case like this reopened, if at all possible, Russell?
Okay, this is where you're going to have a hard time. Okay, if there's no interest to begin with, the likelihood of it ever coming to fruition is very little, very slim. You have someone, either the medical examiner's office, the police, whoever, they're going to have to take an interest. If they have no interest, it's not, more than likely, it probably will not happen.
Now, how about the families, David and Kamel's parents? If they were to try to get this reopened, they are, by the way, if you're familiar with it or not, have both families have bought into the official narrative. So I don't see those stepping up to, push for a reinvestigation. But could they explore the option with a person like with your background to at least get some information, or could they get any further evidence if the case is already closed like this?
If they so chose. They're the ones that are going to have to choose. No matter what you do, there has to be interest. Whether it's from familial, whether it's from law enforcement, whether it's from the medical examiner's office, whether it's from the DA's office, whether it's from anybody, whether it's the Joe Blow that stands on the street and he's a transient. You have to have interest. If that interest does not exist, then it's more than likely not going to happen. But if the interest did exist, law enforcement cannot tell the family, they cannot hire someone who is a professional, who's trained in this area, who's in there both academically and has a legal purview. They can't. They can't. That's all there's to it. And if the case has already been adjudicated, then it becomes even harder. And if the law enforcement or the medical examiner puts in a lot of pressure for you to stop or for the family to stop, then someone needs to take a step back and ask, this is the only one time you need to ask why are they doing that? Because it would be an indication that they did not want to come to find out what the real evidence is stating.
Now we've got a large group on our Facebook group called Justice for David Crowley and Family and it's nearly 2,000 members in this group. Even though we have no connection to the case, the members of the group, and we're not even family, could we gather up and do a fundraising campaign and hire a person like you to get a profile or an analysis of who more than likely was behind this?
If you ask the family, can we do this for you? Because in the end, when everything's said and done, if the family didn't want it, then law enforcement's going to say, I'm sorry, whatever you come up with, it don't mean nothing. That is the sad reality of the situation. You can sit there and spend all your time doing all the research, doing all the work, and if the family does not agree, they do not want to go forward, then any DA, any medical examiner, any law enforcement is going to go along with that because they're not going to put their necks out there.
But does that mean if they try to stand in our way, or does that mean that we would only have to go through the family?
If the family says no, then there's nothing you can do. You can go and do all the investigative stuff you want. Now, if you find criminal negligence, if you find evidence of criminal negligence, then you are responsible to, and you are liable for that evidence, and you hand that evidence in. Now, you cannot act on that evidence. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble. But if you find evidence that something really wasn't quite right and is backed up not by hearsay, not by the truth, but by evidence, then, and if the family doesn't want to listen, if the law enforcement doesn't want to listen, then you hand it in to the state's attorney or the attorney. If he doesn't want to listen, the only thing you can do is bring the evidence and you put it into the purview of the public.
Okay, now have you ever dealt with any case like that where this happened or where this type of thing was actually brought up?
No.
Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Yes. But this will happen. This is where you really, really have to pay attention. You have to dot all your I's. You got to cross all your T's. And if you have any armchair lawyers or space cowboys in your group or whatever, you want to leave them out. Because it will go nowhere. Because what they're looking at, and I have discussed this with other people, whenever you're dealing with a case, the evidence can never be attacked, not directly. The evidence is what it is. It's not biased. It doesn't believe in the truth. It has no self-serving agenda. It's not for one person or another. It is what it is. And that's what scares people about the evidence. So what they will do, instead of attacking the evidence, they will attack the credibility of the person giving that evidence or the science by which this person found that evidence. That's what they will do. So in this, it's great that a lot, and I don't want to shy away from anybody healthy, but when it comes down to the actual real thing and giving this real evidence, giving what you find to the proper authorities, you want to make sure that the person, the man, the woman, or whoever, they're top shelf. Because if you do anything else, they're not going to attack your evidence. They're going to attack the credibility of the person who is giving that evidence. And if the person whose credibility can be attacked, or the science by which that evidence was acquired is attacked, regardless of the evidence is true, whether it's right, whether it's whatever, it will be thrown out. It will be discarded.
Is there anything that the cops did wrong that might help us get them to reopen this case, like the bullet hole that they didn't find for 1 month?
I think the only way that maybe you can do that, because it will not be, and I hate to sound liberal when it comes to this, but it will not be in the best interest of your group to start alienating the police. But you do not step on around eggshells at the same time. So what you do is you get somebody in higher authority to get them to do what they should have normally done to begin with. So you take that information, you take your evidence, you cross all your T's, you dot all your I's, and you give it to a state's attorney.
State's attorney, okay.
And I'm telling you, a state's attorney, and if he finds any credibility in the evidence that you, and remember, not the truth and not your opinion, but the evidence in which you come up with, if he finds any credibility, he or she is the person that has the power to tell the police, guess what you're going to do, whether you like it or not.
You're going to reopen the case.
Yeah, and he or she has the power to do that. And there is no law enforcement agency in the state of Minnesota that's going to tell the state's attorney general no.
So we need a smoking gun.
Yes. And once there's enough circumstantial evidence. Now please hear that correctly. There is enough circumstantial evidence to warrant doubt. That's clear. But a state's attorney general is going to need more than that. But if you can get that, whatever you want to call it, smoking gun thing, he or she has the power, the ultimate power, to sit there and demand the police to reopen it.
So
the police
if
will not say no.
Okay. So if the cops can't match the bullet that they say David killed himself with, the bullet that they didn't find for 1 month, would something like that warrant? Would that fall into this?
If you put that together with the fact of where the body positions were laid, the fact that and you put a lot, see, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. And I think that if you put all that circumstantial evidence together, I think you have enough. Because there's the part where he's laying with his hands flown out. You can sit there and explain that all you want until the cows come home. But that does not, you can get a ballistic expert, that does not explain the position of the gun. I don't care what baloney anyone tells you about, oh, guns can do this or guns can do that after the trigger's pulled. I'm sorry, there's some things that are clean, cut, and dry, and projectiles, guns will only do a certain thing in a certain way if it's done in a certain way. You know, you cannot make them magically dance around a room. Okay? And then the fact that when the guy's laying on the ground and the wife's sweater is over his feet, please pay attention to what it is you're looking at. there are some things that cannot happen if everything happens the way the report says. It can't. It has to be done another way. And if you can show that that was being ignored, that even the possibility, you never want to use definitives. That's one of the advices I will give you. You never use definitives. You know, no, you're setting yourself up for a heartache. But if you can show with inconsistency after inconsistency after inconsistency after inconsistency, which I do believe, I think there's enough circumstantial evidence of that. And if it's put out there in the public purview, then, you know, if the state's attorney general doesn't want to deal with it, because you never know what someone's interest is in something, you can put this out there. And even the only person more stronger than the state's attorney general is the public. They are more stronger than any state's attorney general will ever be. And we know this as Americans as fact, because a president, any president who's at the top of the list, at the top of his game, can be brought down by the public. And so,
yeah,
it's a very, very powerful thing.
So I'm looking at the Attorney General there, Lori Swanson. So is that the person?
I don't know who the state's Attorney General is from Minnesota.
Yeah, her name is Lori Swanson.
But
so it sounds like that's...
If you bring it to her, you must know that you have got to have your best people, your top shelf people on it. You gotta check your information over and over and over again. Make sure everything's concise. Make sure everything is consistent. And you give that to them, because just pretend that you're giving some type of proposal or something to the President of the United States. You're not going to wing it. And if things are so clear that there is no way that you can ignore it, that's what you want.
Okay. And the only thing at that point that would stand in our way, let's say we get everything set up, right? The only thing that would stand in our way would be the family wall. Some say, sound like it would just take one side of the family to say, yeah, we don't want you to investigate in this.
The state's attorney general has the power because they have the responsibility to mete out justice according to the law. And if they find something that where the law has short-stepped on, where the law did not give justice to society or something like that, then what the family feels will be irrelevant and inconsequential, because they are, by their office, they are mandated.
So, Greg, it's irrelevant about the families if you go to the state attorney level.
Okay.
I didn't
hear
you.
Got it.
I just wanted to confirm, Russell, that it's even if the families do not agree, you can still take it to the state attorney and move it forward there and have them review
if the evidence is of such a nature that the state's attorney general warrants that the investigation be reopened, because there has been examples where, generally speaking, because of religious beliefs, because of social beliefs, because of taboos or whatever it is, there have been cases where decedents have not been autopsied, where they are where they're not cremated and all this stuff. But if the information shows that there was some kind of criminal intent or something like that, then that a crime actually that was committed, that somehow someone short-stepped and justice was not served, then what the individual family may believe or may think doesn't hold water. They can go over the family's head. They can cremate. They can do autopsies. They can do whatever. And in those cases, the family has nothing to say. So
how quickly can they cremate?
Oh, you can if especially if you have money, you can have someone cremated if you have money or if you are in the know within 24 hours of the body actually being sent to the coroner. It's quite fast. But you have to do it fast enough where you sidestep everything. Because before it is decided that a real crime had occurred, yes, the family can demand the body be cremated. But once it's been determined that a criminal act, that a crime did commit, and a felony was committed, and that felony led to the deaths of the decedents, then they can sit there and request all they want, and it's not going to happen. But now if you have an unscrupulous person, they can go ahead and sidestep that before anyone else can stop them and have the body cremated. So it's not a hard thing to do.
Well, now could they do that for all three bodies? Because
yes.
Only 2 of those 3 bodies were actually cremated. So is there a way that they could say, hey, I just want to make sure these 2 bodies are cremated?
It seems odd. I mean, if you are a forensic pathologist or you're just a regular medical examiner of any weight, that would seem, I would question that. Now, whether or not you can go against that legally, that's a different story. Because they cannot just decide arbitrarily or unilaterally, well, I don't like the way you asked that, or I don't like your request, so I'm not going to let you do that. No, they can't do that. Even though they may think this is odd. This is why it's so important, and I like to stress that, it's so important to make sure everything's done right the first time. Because in forensics, there is no do-overs. You cannot go back and have a second chance. Now you can go and you cannot recreate the evidence. You cannot put everything back the way it was. That's just not the way it happens. But what you can do is you can work with the evidence, and you can work with how that was collected. You can work with the ineptability of however it was studied or investigated and stuff like that. So you're going on the legal aspect, but there is no do-overs in forensics. That's why it's extremely important everything be done painfully the way it should be done.
Russell, by going through the crime scene photos, were there any that jumped out at you in particular that you can remember that helped with your decision and your view of the case that others may want to be interested in by looking at here?
Yes, I would say the biggest things that is the Islamic stuff. I would have to say that and the picture of the bay window, and take a look at that picture, and you will see I think it was the medical examiner's van or the CSI van or whoever it was out front, and take a look at that picture and just imagine that picture in a dog being seen at that front window. Imagine how that would be. And after you imagine it, then go back and look at the picture. What you imagine, what should have been, isn't what you're seeing. So either someone's outright lying, or they're lying by what is that called? By you know, when you I'm at a loss right here, but you know, you lie by not telling.
Lying by
omission.
Omission?
Yes, you're lying by omission. Because if you read the account that is written in the police report and then take a look at that window, the two things could not have happened. Only one of those things could have happened. Both of them could not. So it's either the scene is wrong or the report is wrong. So there's that. There is the photograph of the man laying there with the report of the man laying there with the wife's sweater over his feet. What should have happened, what happened, and what was written to happen are completely different, and that should not be. That should not be. Then I would question the veracity of whether or not the door was actually opened. You're
talking about the back door?
Yes.
Or the front door?
I would question the veracity of whether that door was actually opened or not.
When it was open or not during the killings, or?
Yeah. It just doesn't matter whether it was open or not. Doesn't matter who did or did not open. It's whether or not the door was open. Because how the dog is acting, how everything is supposed to react, and how the report is stating, and how someone's saying the dog looked, and then how someone's saying the dog didn't look, and then the fact that the door was open, so there's always a chance for the dog to get out. See, something's not right. It's either the crime scene is wrong or the report is wrong. And God forbid both of them be wrong.
Well, I mean, we do have photos of the back door open and closed, so that was another thing of why the police took photos of the rear slider both open and closed. But they did that with other doors, where they would show they take pictures of doors being open and doors being closed.
No.
They've done that with the 3 toilet seats. They have photos of the toilet seats open and the toilet seats closed.
And see, this is the problem that you run into. And here's the problem. You go in while everything's still in situ, and you take pictures once, and only once, of everything. You take pictures. You do not worry about the amount of pictures. You over-picture everything. And that should be it. Those are the pictures that should be turned in as evidence. You don't go back and take pictures again. I try to stress that to my students. And this is something people really got to get into their mind. There are no do-overs in forensics. There is no second chance. Everything's done right the first time. And it's those pictures and only those pictures that should be submitted as evidence. Now, if they're taking pictures of a toilet seat up and then somebody goes back and takes a picture of a toilet seat down, there's something not right there. Because was the toilet seat up or was it down? It doesn't matter if it was up or was down. It's got to be either or. It can't be both.
But is there any reason for them to take those photos? Just to show what it looks like open and shut?
No. Because unfortunately, this is the other problem with TV. TV just does such a bad thing for this. Everything in situ, the very first time. Pictures are taken of everything. Now, the only time that I could see them closing the toilet seat and taking a picture of it open and then closing it to take a picture is if they found trace evidence or they found bodily fluid, they found blood, they found something that was on the back of the toilet seat. Then, during the first time, there should not be a huge time disparity between the pictures. Okay? And so then they would take the picture of the seat closed, because you have to close it because you have to get the pictures in situ. I mean, that's all there's to it. And and those pictures are taken before the techs come in and do their work. Once techs get there is no going in there and taking pictures again. There is no do-overs. Now, if someone did that and there's a disparity in the timeline between the picture was taken and the other picture was taken, and it's both being entered as official evidence, I would question that. I would have to ask, I can't accuse, but I would have to ask, what was the justification and why the time disparity? That's why I said in my open statements, it's very crucial, because the time, once that timeline starts, from the moment that police, that very first responder sees that there could have been a crime committed, you are on the clock. And time becomes a very valuable commodity. There is no do-overs.
Well, I want to thank you, Russell, for your time tonight, because I think this has been a very enlightening discussion. Greg, do you have any other further questions or anything else you can think of, Russell?
No.
Yeah, I don't have anything further. If you do, Greg, and if not, I think we can wrap it up. But this is very well done. I appreciate your time speaking with us tonight.
I know it sounds corny, but this is why I live. I'm very passionate about what I do. I don't love it and I don't like it. That to me is tantamount to a hobby, and hobbies have no place in forensics. I'm passionate about this. So.
Very good, very good. Well, once again, appreciate your time, and can't thank you enough. That's really appreciated. It's awesome. All right, Greg, I think we can wrap up. You can shut off the recording, and what we'll do is publish this, and people can listen to it at their leisure here in the future. But thanks again for your time. We really appreciate your time, Russell.
Anytime, because this is what I live for.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.